The wealth of the world's 10 richest men has doubled since the pandemic began. So the incomes of 99% of humanity are worse off because of COVID-19, widening economic, gender and racial inequalities, as well as the inequality that exists between countries, are tearing the world apart. This is according to an OXFAM International's Inequality Kills report. Let's explore this now in the South African context with Thembinkosi Dlamini, who is a senior executive leading there at OXFAM South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks indeed for your time. So how much more worse off are we? Because according to that report, from what I saw, women, ethnic minorities and developing countries have been hardest hit by growing inequality since the start of this pandemic.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Indeed, the developing world, especially low-income countries, ethnic minorities, in them women in particular, have been made far worse off since the beginning of the pandemic. This is not surprising because even before the pandemic, women in particular were at the periphery of the economy. They were involved in mostly precarious jobs without security, jobs where you have to work long hours, unsafe working conditions, and they were not allowed to unionize and therefore bargain for their rights. So with the coming in of the pandemic, women in particular lost jobs in higher numbers because most of the jobs that were occupied by women in bulk, there were jobs that did not require that much in terms of skills or qualifications. So they are unlikely going to rejoin the job market as well, even after the pandemic.
And this is quite dangerous, is it? Because according to your report as well, black women are already the least likely to be employed in South Africa.
Yes, that is correct. They are unlikely going to be re-employed, especially in South Africa, because the economy is not creating new jobs. It is rather shedding jobs. Now, with the lockdown, which was coming on and off, it also had an effect on the fallback position, like the informal jobs that women occupy in informal waste picking, in the factories as domestic workers, and also in trading of second-hand clothing, hair salons and the like. Women also bear the burden of unpaid care work in South Africa and elsewhere in the world. So the sick relatives had to be taken care of by women. The kids who were spending more time at home instead of school, they needed to be taken care of. So that is why the participation of women in the workplace has suffered a drastic drop during the COVID pandemic, and the situation is likely going to persist.
Mr. Dlamini, what should governments be doing to redress this? And I mean, if you talk about issues of widening corruption, that on its own exacerbates that divide. Look at what we saw with regard to PPE graft, for example.
Yes, precisely. It is very important for us to go back and look at the underlying causes of the challenge of inequality. Some of the things that we have seen is that not just with corruption and fraud and all of those evils, but also the weakening of regulations, policies that are meant to cushion the majority of the population. What we have also seen is skyrocketing market prices, a boom in terms of unregulated entities that are in the market, and a surge in monopoly power and privatization of healthcare, of education, and all of those things that we used to think they were essential services and therefore were under the government. Not only that, there was also an erosion of individual corporate tax rates, which means governments also have suffered a lot in terms of their ability to mobilize resources as this was happening. A South Africa report has shown us, for instance, that Johan Rupert's income grew by $400 million in 2 days when the Richmond shares soared by 5.5%. So Johan didn't do anything in particular to ensure that they increase their wealth by this much. So what we are seeing is a system, a global finance system that was structured in such a way that it promotes the obscene accumulation of wealth by a few individuals instead of supporting the majority of our people to live better lives.
Thembinkosi Dlamini from OXFAM South Africa, thank you very much for joining us here for a full view. Of course, giving us some insight into that report by OXFAM. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme.